It's been a done deal for months. Boston's next mayor would make history on multiple fronts. And now it's official. Michelle Wu is the first ever woman and person of color elected to lead the city after nearly 200 years of white men.
One of my sons asked me the other night if boys can be elected mayor in Boston. They have been, and they will again someday, but not tonight.
I know this is no small feat. You know this is no small feat. I want her to show the city how mothers get it done.
Wu won by nearly 30 points, a clear mandate in a race often painted, fairly or not, as a choice between her big aspirational policy goals and what Annissa Essaibi-George framed as her own more practical, achievable proposals. The outcome wasn't a huge surprise to anyone who'd seen Wu's double-digit leads in the polls in recent weeks, but a few other races in the national spotlight did buck expectations, like this one in particular.
All righty, Virginia, we won this thing!
That would be Glenn Youngkin, who Van Jones aptly noted represents the Delta variant of Trumpism, and who beat former Governor Terry McAuliffe to become Virginia's first Republican governor in more than a decade. Joining me to weigh in on all of this, in addition to those $2 trillion plus bills, is Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, a former city council colleague of both Wu and Essaibi-George. Congresswoman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
All right, good to see you.
So your endorsed candidate won in a landslide yesterday in Boston. What's the significance of finally breaking this, 200-year-old stranglehold white men have had on the mayor's office in Boston?
Yeah, well, Jim, let's be clear. This historic victory of Michelle Wu began long before this election cycle. This is really a testament to decades of community organizing, of movement building, and also of those who came before her. So I do want to lift up those who ran like Mel King and Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, those who were elected citywide like Bruce Bowling and Felix Arroyo and Sam Yoon. And this is also a testament, to the organizers. And we saw some unprecedented, historic, diverse representation, not only in the candidates for mayor, for city council, but also in who was running those campaigns.
So what's her mandate? When you have that kind of margin, you have a mandate. What is it?
Yeah, I think that the voters sent a clear message that we find ourselves in an unprecedented moment as a country, as a commonwealth, and a city, and that they want a visionary leader who will tackle and confront our hardest challenges with boldness. And I've known Michelle to be an innovator, to be disruptive in the sense that she does not take the status quo usual response to things as acceptable. And I saw what she did on the Boston City Council as a counselor in a strong mayor form of government, where she was able to tackle tough things and to make them real, like paid leave, like disability access for the city council chambers, working with me to issue a new mandate when it came to our spin with minority contractors. So what she'll be able to do as an executive is exciting and promising.
One of the things that we talked to her about on the radio the other day was the free tea, and we asked her, where does the money come from? And one of the things she mentioned was federal legislation. If Congress is able to pass the $1 trillion bipartisan bill, the almost $2 trillion social infrastructure / climate bill, is there going to be an appetite to do enough money on the transportation front to ensure that things like free transportation on the T in Boston are a reality?
Well, first and foremost, Jim, as the co-founder of the Future of Transportation Caucus, certainly I fought for those investments in language in the physical infrastructure bill, fighting to ensure that it would not just be highways, roads, and bridges, but that it would also include public transit. Michelle shares that commitment because transit justice is fundamental to, I believe, addressing both our climate crisis, but also rooting out the racial inequities and disparities that exist throughout the Massachusetts 7th and certainly in the city of Boston, where you have Black Boston bus riders riding an additional 64 hours a year compared to our white peers. You have Black Boston bus riders riding, waiting, and transferring longer to get to work, to get to healthcare appointments, to get to childcare, to get to school. All of those things contribute to that $50,000 contrast in my district from Cambridge to Roxbury in median wealth, $50,000 drop, and also in life expectancy. So Michelle has long been a transit justice advocate. This is one of the things that I commend her for in her time on the council. People said that was a state issue. And she said, anything that is an issue of care and concern and consequence of the people I represent is my responsibility to care about. And she has really thrown her shoulder in on those issues. So she's going to be a great partner, which is another reason why I was so proud to endorse her, because I want to make sure that as I fight to successfully secure these funds for the Massachusetts 7th and for the city of Boston, that we have a fiscal steward who will center equity and justice in those allocations.
So you think the federal money will be there for her?
I'm certainly going to keep fighting for it to be, and I'm encouraged by the conversations that I've had with our Senate partners, including Senator Markey, as we fight to keep the language in this package.
You know as well as anybody that there were, of the 5 candidates, 3 of the candidates were Black. None of them made the final. Virtually every Black leader led by you, maybe with the exception of former police commissioner Willie Gross, endorsed Michelle Wu. What should Black voters in the city expect from a Wu mayoralty?
I think they should expect, and I said to her that, you know, I'm of the Stacey Abrams school of thought that we don't elect saviors, we elect leaders and partners, and I expect that we'll hold her accountable to, again, actualize racial justice, to when we talk about having a thriving business community, that we know that cannot be true if we don't have a thriving Black business community. And she will be committed to making sure that our small businesses of every iteration have a robust recovery. There have been projections that 40% of small Black-owned businesses will remain permanently shuttered. I know that she'll prioritize growth of Black home ownership, because that is critical to combating the racial wealth gap. I know that she'll prioritize investments in our community health centers, which have played a critical role in combating health disparities. So those are just 3 things that I would lift up: Black home ownership, Black businesses, and Black contracting. And I do believe she will also have a cabinet that is reflective and representative of the city of Boston.
When you were a city councilor, did you want to be mayor?
No.
Really? No?
No.
Why? Why would you,
No.
if you wanted to represent the city, why would you not want to represent the city as its leader? I'm surprised to hear you say that. Well,
you know, we're here today to talk about this historic mayoral season. But I'll just say that I as painful as it may look to you, Jim, from the outside looking in, as you see what's happening here in Washington, I really do appreciate the challenge of legislating. Yeah. And policy is my love language, and I do believe it is the only way to effectuate transformative systemic change, because the hurt and harm that my community and other marginalized communities have experienced is the result of policy, and usually federal policy.
I want to get to federal policy and federal votes in just a second, but one more electoral question. The conventional wisdom, I think it's fair to say, out of yesterday, particularly Virginia, was an unmitigated disaster for the Democratic Party in the midterms in 2022 and possibly in 2024. Do you subscribe to that analysis?
What happened in Virginia is a consistent and hard lesson that Democrats are just going to have to get through our thick skull, that ultimately the ultimate persuasion tool is impact. And Democrats win when we deliver, and especially when we deliver to the base. And that's exactly why myself and other members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus, held the line to ensure that we would leave no one behind. And that's why we did not on September 27th move on a physical infrastructure package without moving on a bold reconciliation package to truly build back better, to leave no one behind. And that includes the diverse coalition of voters led by Black voters who made this Democratic majority possible. And that's why we need these investments in childcare and childcare workers who are mostly women of color. That's why we had to do something for home and community-based services for the disabled and elderly, because many of those workers are women and women of color. And 2 million plus women, Jim, have left the workforce. Economists are calling this more than a recession, it's a she-cession. And many of them are women of color because they did not have access to childcare and paid leave. So that's why we had to fight for these investments in housing. Black women are the most vulnerable to eviction. We have to expand and preserve our affordable housing. We have to make those investments in public housing. I have seniors in my district, Jim, living in public housing that hasn't seen any improvement since the 1930s, with raw backup sewage, black mold, rodent infestation. It's unacceptable. So Democrats win when we deliver. And I'm going to say this finally, I will not stand for the progressive flank or Black voters being blamed for that victory. Democrats win when we deliver. No community, no marginalized community that has historically been the most reliable to this party, while also woefully disenfranchised, that is fighting right now still for access to the ballot in this fight for voting rights, should be maligned in this, you know.
But if
It's
I may,
important that we,
your party plays by totally different rules than the Republicans do. I mean, you look at Virginia, and critical race theory, which isn't even being taught, is a catch-all for any cultural issue that bothers you. The Democrats can't convey what they're for. In the Senate, Mitch McConnell has no problem dumping the filibuster to confirm 3 Trump nominees for lifetime appointments. The President of the United States, a Democrat, can't even say we should get rid of the filibuster so that we have voting protection in this country. That's a real problem on the Democratic side.
Well, Jim, let me say this. I do believe the administration is moving on that. And the reason why they're moving on that and there's discussion happening is because of the strength of this movement, which is saying that we cannot allow this Jim Crow filibuster to obstruct progress when it comes to everything from police reform to voting rights to an infrastructure bill. And what is an infrastructure bill? That's the other thing. There's been so much talk about numbers and the titling of bills that people are losing sight of what this is about. This is about creating transformative change and impact that people can feel in their lives every day, like childcare, like paid leave, like housing, like climate investments. And these are the things that are going to speak to our base. And these are the things that are going to benefit everyone. And that is why we will build back better when we move on both of these bills. But when it comes to the dog whistle, and it's not even a dog whistle, it's a bullhorn that took place in Virginia. If that is a bellwether of what is to come, and it's a predictable play, the Democrats, we have got to confront race head on and be able to talk about it. And those are a lot of the discussions that are already taking place internally. And finally, Jim, the elections in Boston should be a bellwether for this Democratic Party of what is to come. If we learn the lessons and follow that blueprint, we saw in Boston yesterday, the first election of a Haitian American in Ruth Z, the second election of an Afro-Latina to the city council, the election of the first Muslim, and our first woman and woman of color elected. And that mantle will then be turned over to her by Kim Janey, a Black woman. This is a new dawn. This is a new day. And it is possible when we organize for it and we do a politics of transformation, not transaction, and we are in community in a deep and meaningful way. And then, Jim, doing more than offering flowery statements which espouse our principles, but we're practicing them with policies and budgets. Those are the only receipts that matter to the American people right now.
So speaking of this transformative change, as recently as a few days ago, the leader of the Progressive Caucus, Congresswoman Jayapal, made it clear relentlessly, as did many members of the caucus, we don't vote on these bills until we know that 50 Democrats, including Manchin and Sinema, are going to vote for them too. Manchin gives a presentation to the press on Monday, says, I'm not going to be held hostage by those people in the House. And lo and behold, the next day, the Progressive Caucus says we are going to vote on both those bills, even though we don't have a commitment from Manchin and Sinema yet. What changed?
There's broad consensus that we need to move on both of these bills. We need both, and that is going to happen. We just stay at the table and we keep working. Case in point, paid leave had been taken off of the table. We continue to organize, continue to fight for that, and now that is back in.
Manchin said today he won't do it, Congresswoman. I'm sorry. He said, you can try it, I'm paraphrasing, as many times as you want. I'm not doing it.
You know what, Jim? Honestly, I think that we give Manchin too much oxygen. And I think that rather than our offering a punditry and analysis about his rationale, people should ask him why, as a member of the Democratic Party, he is so keen on being an obstructionist of the president's agenda, which, by the way, is the people's agenda. And by the way, these policies are not fringe marginal things. They are wildly popular, and they are wildly popular because they are sorely needed. Reducing the cost of prescription drugs, climate investments, housing justice, paid leave, childcare. These are not nice to haves, Jim. These are must haves. Infrastructure are those things that are essential to the functioning of our society. And I don't know how you have a GDP or preserved families without childcare or without paid leave. So these are not nice to haves, these are must haves. I would encourage Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema to talk to their constituents, because that's what I do every day. And they tell me to keep fighting and keep going because they need these investments. And I do think we should abolish the filibuster. And I do think that when we have the parliamentarian not ruling in our favor, by the way, that is a non-binding ruling, then the Senate should challenge that. And so in this moment, Jim, I think the point is the Democrats have the House, we have the Senate, and we have the White House. And being in the majority must mean more than a talking point. And so we're arriving at that inflection point. But for now, we just have to keep working. And I look forward to our moving both of these bills out of the House.
We only have 45 seconds left. Would you mind telling people why you're wearing that incredibly beautiful flower? Do you mind saying why?
I don't, but I'll just begin by saying that my name, Ayanna, is a Swahili name, which means beautiful flower, is the interpretation of that. And my mother often gifted me with flowers as a reminder of the meaning of my name. And so today I was thinking of her. My mother was a proud Democrat. She was a super voter. And I do want to just say this because, Jim, I've had the honor to serve with both Anissa and Michelle. And I have history and relationship with the both of them and have done good work with both of them. Mm-hmm. And as I close this out talking about my mom, when Anissa said, I look forward to being a partner with Michelle and her showing the city what moms can do and how they lead. Very appropriate note with which to end this on, very consistent with the Anissa that I know. And when Michelle said, yes, we can do big things and take care of potholes too. I think that about sums it up, that's what the city of Boston is looking for in this moment. And that's what Michelle will do as mayor.
Ayanna Pressley, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thank you.